Hi again guys, and welcome to episode 54 of Quattroporte, the review series for the sports and super saloon or sedan selection on Gran Turismo 6, and many of these vehicles fall into a very popular category of vehicle, which is most commonly known as sleeper cars, sometimes called Q cars, basically vehicles which have performance that belies their looks. They look understated, they look mainstream, they even look boring, but their performance is far better than that. And this, to some degree, is kind of one of those vehicles. Now, we've already kind of discussed this car in an existing series. We discussed the wagon version in the Party in the Back series. In fact, we discussed all of the Legacy wagons. Now, in this series, we're not going to be covering every single Legacy sedan, just the highlights, and we've already talked about the Blitzen version. Now we're talking about the much more understated but still sportier model of the Legacy, the 2.0 GT Spec B. This is the closest to the Impreza in the way it looks. It has the bonnet scoop, the sportier bumper kit, etc. So the question is, why buy a Legacy when you've got the option of the Impreza? Well, basically the same reason, I would say, as why you'd buy the Legnum or the Galant over the Evo. It's an interesting alternative, and it's less expected. If you pull out an Evo or an Impreza in a public lobby, that's cliched. Of course you're going to pull out an Evo or an Impreza. They're brilliant cars, people expect that, and they will treat you accordingly. They will view you as a threat, and they will drive defensively, and you will actually subconsciously make them drive better because they know that you are a threat to victory. In something like a Legnum or a Galant, or in this case a Legacy, however, people don't think that. They think, why has he brought out that boring sedan? That's not a threat. In fact, they probably won't even think that. They won't think anything. They won't even notice you. It's such a sleeper car. It's just a normal everyday car. And that's the beauty of vehicles like the Galant, the Legacy, etc. They offer the similar advantages and disadvantages, but primarily, of course, advantages to the more expected models like the Evos, the Imprezas and various others, but in that so much more understated package. And in the case of this particular Legacy, it does have a lot to offer. It essentially has a very similar spec to the Impreza. The weight is a little bit higher than some, as you'd probably expect. It is, after all, a more luxuriously equipped vehicle than the Impreza, but overall you get a very similar vehicle. You get a 2-litre turbo boxer engine, 546 horsepower, which is similar to the Impreza, some of them at least, 388 foot-pounds of torque, and it weighs in at 1171 kilos, and that is heavier than some of the Imprezas, but at the same time isn't bad, especially for an all-wheel drive car. As far as horsepower per tonne, you're looking at 466, which is actually pretty good considering that this is not a super saloon, it's just a sports saloon, and within the sports saloon category, that is a good horsepower per tonne to be pushing. As far as its maximum PP, you're looking at 561, which, to be honest, is a little high. It's not really competitive enough at that level, but for anything up to, say, 500 pp, maybe more, but be careful once you get to that level, it is a useful car. For the aforementioned reasons, because it offers the all-wheel drive handling, the performance, for the most part, of the Impreza, but in that much more understated sleeper package. But also due to the fact that this car's dirt cheap. It costs just under 29 grand, and a 546 horsepower all-wheel drive Japanese sports sedan for 29 grand is really good value. The Legacy is a very good car in all of its forms. People don't give it enough credit for that. It's actually a really good performance car. In a similar way to vehicles like Saab and Volvo, people don't think of them as being high performance cars, but they actually are. And just like those vehicles, this car can actually shock other drivers and put to shame vehicles which visually may be far more showy, far more shouty, loud, with silly wings and body kits even. Now, I fitted a wing and the coloured rims to make this car look a little bit more like an Impreza, but even so, it's not a threatening looking car. If you pull out a lesser Impreza, people are going to notice. You upgrade this thing and people are just going to think, what on earth are you doing upgrading that car? It's a waste of time. And that can be a very, very good advantage to have at your disposal. Now, as far as how the car performs, as I mentioned earlier, you're running basically the same advantages and disadvantages as all of the Imprezas, and also to some degree as the Legnums, the Galants, the Evos, etc. And those are strong launch, decent acceleration, very good handling, huge amounts of grip, very good brakes and drivability, very good value. But the only real significant downside is the lack of top-end power. The exact same issue that the Imprezas and Evos suffer from. Not surprising. This is not going to beat the Dodge Charger, the BMW M5, or any of those super saloons for top-end performance. It's just not going to do it. The top speed is 30 or 40 miles per hour off their pace, so it's just not going to happen. But around the track, it may not have anywhere near their kind of power, but it can give any super saloon a great run for their money around a twisty circuit, because it's all well and good having 7, 8, 900 horsepower, but only if you can put that down to the road. If you're constantly shredding your tyres through tight corners, such as on city circuits or tracks like Bathurst, this car is going to make up ground. It has less power to deal with, but it can maintain sometimes higher cornering speeds and get through the corners quicker. So it's a car that shouldn't be overestimated, obviously, but also not underestimated. It definitely has its uses, and for sleeper fans, you should definitely check out the Legacy range. But that's it overall for this particular pick. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.